It's interesting to apply some analytic comments by the pioneer of the negritude movement in the 50s, Aime Cesaire, who wrote a very famous pamphlet which we'd recommend everyone read, Discourse on Colonialism, it's called. And he argued that the leading Western powers, the problem they had with Hitler was not what he did necessarily to the European people in his Holocaust, but that he had the audacity to apply this genocidal policy upon European people, which hitherto had only been applied to the on the colonial peoples of the global South, or the southern continents of Africa, Asia, and so-called Latin America. And if we apply that similar framework to the Ukraine conflict, it's bringing really the politics of occupation and conflict and dehumanization, which was applied in the last generation's living memory on peoples of Somalia, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Sierra Leone, etc. It's applying a very similar racist, violent framework upon a European people. Are they European people, Ukrainians? Are East European people considered as equals by Western nations? Well, they're clearly not, because East European migrant communities in Western Europe are basically in conditions of poverty, oppression, and exploitation like many others from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The industrial sexual exploitation of East European women is clearly there as well. So actually, on the one hand, the Western nations posture like Ukrainians are white and European like themselves, but on the other hand, they're not fully European and white, and you can see that in the manner in which Western nations have really refused to militarily back Ukraine towards strategic victories against the Russian occupation and project of annexation. The Russian military is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times bigger in its military capacity than the Ukrainian armed forces. The Russian economy is on a war footing in relation to feeding its war machine in Ukraine, and there has been no similar kind of mirroring of economic kind of war strategy by Western nations in support of Ukraine. So Ukraine, on the one hand, is utilized by Western nations to develop a racist, violent NATO culture, but on the other hand, it doesn't actually deliver that to Ukrainians, because really they're basically expendable and they can be used for NATO strategies. And so what are those NATO strategies here going forward? It's, first of all, is to bog down its major new global competitor, that is Russia, in a conflict that is just totally sapping the energy and the capacity and the human resources of the Russian peoples, particularly the more oppressed people in Russia, who are being basically forced and thrown into this war in their hundreds of thousands, actually. But it's also then to ensnare China, and really China probably has realized it's, like many other things actually in recently with the Chinese leadership, but is grossly and historically miscalculated, and has really in a relationship of a junior relationship and an inferior relationship with the Russian leadership, thought that Putin is somehow the big daddy, the big brother who can, swagger around with his military arrogance and slap the West into place.